Everybody, welcome back to Saturdays in the SEC, episode 125. We're back tonight for our final episode of the 2024 SEC preview series. We'll be all the way through every team, all 16 in the SEC. We'll be done with previews, and it'll be all ball talk from here on out. We're sitting here August the 19th, just mere days away from week 0 kicking off. We'll have a full week 1 preview coming next week. So excited that football season's finally here, and just excited to kick this season off. Think it's going to be a special one. So many storylines going into this year. It's going to be fun to watch all year. Great matchups, some of the best we've ever had. So can't wait to get this season started off this weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun. But for tonight, we're going to end the SEC preview series with Arkansas and Oklahoma, two teams that are really interesting coming in this year. You got on one hand Oklahoma, their first inaugural season here in the SEC. The league did them no favors on the scheduling. It's going to be a really tough slate for Brent Venables and the Sooners. And then we got Arkansas with Sam Pittman. I was actually looking at some betting odds today. He's the second most likely coach to be fired in the betting odds, just behind Billy Napier. I think Sam Pittman's at 5-1. So obviously a lot of I don't know, anxiety is the right word, but a lot of people, wondering what the future of this Razorback football program is going to be, who's going to be leading them in the future. Is it Sam Pittman? I feel like the mood of Arkansas fans is they just really want a sense of what direction they're going to be going. Like, I don't know if 6-6 is really that's not really going to satisfy anybody. I mean, that'd be hitting their over total. Their over under is 5.5 right now. But I think Arkansas fans, I think they either want to overachieve by a good bit or just say, hey, I think they want a clear direction one way or the other. Are we going to stick with Sam Pittman? We have an overachieving season, or kind of just go in the tank a little bit and, okay, we know what our decision is going to be now, and then we go into the future. That's kind of how I feel the mood is for Arkansas. Like, they just want a direction one way or the other. But kind of give me your thoughts on this Razorback team. I mean, certainly some good pieces on this roster coming in 2024.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Think they want to find their identity. They're 3-9 the last 2 seasons in one-score ball games. I believe 5 of those losses came in conference. So they need to finish. They're there in the games. They're competing in the games. Their talent is there. They just can't close the deal. They turn the ball over to lose a game. They can't get a defensive stop to seal a game. It's things along those lines. Their defense did get insanely better last year under Travis Williams as a new DC last year. This is his second year there. He's been recruiting well on the defensive side of the ball. They went in the transfer portal and got some linebackers. They're just thin depth-wise at some places defensively for sure. They don't really return too many starters. They got a lot of transfer guys, though, offensively and defensively as well. I think their defense is going to be a little bit better than it was last year. It jumped 77 places. It was 123rd overall in yards per game, and it finished 46 last year. So the year before, it was 123rd in total yards a game, and last year it was 46. So, I mean, drastic difference on the defensive side of the football last year. I expect them to build on that. I don't know how much better it can be or how much better the team can be, even if the defense is the same as last year. Offensively, that they returned Andrew Armstrong, great receiver. He has potential to be one of the Arkansas's all-time best receivers at the end of the season if he has a great year. You got Tyrone Broden transferred in. He transferred in from Bowling Green, excuse me. You got Isaiah Satanga, really quick, fast receiver. He's really their only speed guy. They got a bunch of big guys. That Tyrone Broden is 6'7", I believe. Then you got at running back position, you got Rashad Dubinion. He's been there a while. He's an all-purpose back. And then Jaquindon Jackson. He's coming in from Utah. Played a lot of ball at Utah. Expected to to split carries there. Jaquindon Jackson and Rashad Dubinion, after losing Rocket Sanders, those guys are expected to carry the load offensively. Then you got Taylen Green at quarterback. He's a dual threat guy. Passing game's not really where it needs to be, in my opinion, to compete at a high level in the SEC. But he is with Petrino, so they're see what they can figure out. I mean, Petrino likes to throw the football, so he's going to be a have to throw the football, but they're going to have to lean into his run game. Excuse me, it's a lot like Milroe, except Milroe can throw the ball. He's pretty accurate. He's a really good passer, but in the sense that you got to lean into what your strengths are to make your offense better. And I think they understand that. I think he's going to be good in the RPOs, especially with the two backs I just named. But the passing's got to come up and exceed to a second level. Boise State, he was okay, but I don't think that where he was then is good enough to win at a high level in the SEC. So if he can build on where he was and they can work with him and he can become a better passer, I think that they have a chance to exceed expectations. But man, just looking at their schedule, it's pretty tough. They open up the SEC with Auburn at Auburn. So that's their first SEC game of the year is going to Jordan-Hare on September 21st. Then after that, they got Texas A&M in Arlington. So it is a neutral site, but you got to face Texas A&M. That's early. They're probably going to still be healthy, fully healthy and ready to go. Then after that, Tennessee, LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Texas, Louisiana Tech, and Missouri. You go to in the conference. You go to Auburn, Mississippi State, and Missouri. So your road games are fairly manageable. I mean, Missouri obviously is really good, but it's not the toughest places. Not one of the toughest places to play. You get to host Tennessee, you host LSU, you host Ole Miss, and you host Texas. So that's really big. I think the schedule's in their favor. Like I said, against the bigger teams to help them out being at home. And their road games not being too bad. If they can start off the season 3-0, I think that they can give Auburn a really tough time. Oklahoma State, they're a really good team. Went to the conference championship last year. If they can get by Oklahoma State, I'm gonna be a little worried as an Auburn fan, depending on how their offense is running. I really don't know what to expect. Talk is cheap, but that's all we got right now. Season really ain't officially started yet, so. I'm excited to see how it plays out. But what's your thoughts on the new offense and how it's going to be ran and the new players they've plugged in? And their offensive line, they went and got guys out through the portal because their offensive line was a big problem last year. They're going to have pretty much 5 new guys there. Not really that many, but they're going to have a lot of new guys in the offensive line holes through the transfer portal. They got their 2 guards are returning. The 2 guards are returning. Let me see. Patrick Kutas and John Braun. They're the 2 guys returning on the offensive line. Everybody else is coming. They're getting through the portal. So you got to find the camaraderie there. How can they work together as a unit? But what's your thoughts on it, and what are your expectations? And then we'll come back to their season schedules or their record at the end.
Yeah, I mean, some good pieces offensively. I mean, like you highlighted, a lot of receivers returning. I believe I read their top 8 pass catchers from last year are returning, which obviously they didn't throw, they didn't have great passing numbers. So a lot of those guys, it wasn't very high yardage totals. I think the highest guy only had like 400 something yards, or I mean, it was a pretty low amount. So some guys that have some playing experience but don't have a ton of production. But I think guys that they can get more out of in the right situation. You mentioned the offensive line, a couple new faces there. That to me is the key to the entire team. I mean, when you think of a Sam Pittman program, you would think like, hey, that offensive line, like regardless of anything else, that offensive line is going to dominate at the point of attack. Like we know we're going to be strong up front, and really that wasn't the case last year at all. I mean, that was one of their weakest areas, one of their biggest question marks this year. If they can kind of rectify that a little bit, that's going to go a long way into helping them potentially, win some of those, 1-score ball games that they lost in the past year or two when things haven't really been going their way. So they've got to get the offensive line more physical, doing a better job, being balanced offensively. You mentioned Taylen Green. wasn't great as a passer at Boise State, sub 60% completion percentage. So that's something that's going to have to improve. Um, does, as I mentioned before, have a really experienced, receiver group that's been in the program. Also has one of the better tight end rooms in the SEC, led by Luke Haas. So,
Yeah.
some good weapons there, to work with. I mean, no really superstars necessarily, but some solid players. I really like Jaquindon Jackson though from Utah. I think that's a really nice pickup. Going to be, as you said, sharing the low with Rashad Dubinion. So, overall, I mean, some pretty good pieces for Bobby Petrino to work with. But it's all going to key on that offensive line. Kind of looking defensively though, that really the strength of their entire team is the defensive front. They
Yeah.
were really solid against the run last year, led by Landon Jackson, probably the best player on this roster. Could be an early round pick in this next draft. So he's a guy that was extremely disruptive a year ago. So I mean, that defensive front is really going to be the standout unit of this team. And as you mentioned, the whole defense, took a big step forward last year, and the defensive line was a main reason they were able to do that. So if they can continue to make some gains there, hopefully are able to be a little bit more balanced, on the offensive side, I think they could potentially, win some of those one score games that they weren't able to win in the last year or two. The schedule, I mean, it's definitely tough, but home game wise, you couldn't ask for it to be much better. I mean, A&M neutral site, obviously Southwest Classic, and you mentioned with Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, and Texas all coming to DWR there. So, um, I mean that's a elite home schedule. Maybe gives them a chance to win, one or two of those. I mean, you never know. Like I said, that Oklahoma State game early in the year is critical. That's a tough road game though, in Stillwater against a really good Oklahoma State team that's got one of the better players in the country in Ollie Gordon at running back. So that's a really interesting early game that I'm going to be watching closely. But yeah, if they're able to win that one, that gives them a lot of confidence going into Jordan Hare in week 4, and have a little road experience early on will be good for them, regardless of win or lose. That'd be helpful. But yeah, a couple early games in the season, if they could get to go their way, would really change the trajectory of the entire season. And maybe Sam Pittman's 10 years old.
What do you think in their records are going to be?
It's tough to say. I mean, obviously, I think they definitely win probably 2 of those first 4. I see them beating Arkansas, Pine Bluff, UAB at home. I don't think they probably win at Oklahoma State or Auburn, to be honest with you. Um, so I got them 2-2 in the first 4. That Southwest Classic's always a really hard fought game. It hasn't really went their way very often, but I do think that's going to be a really competitive game there in Arlington. The last year, I believe that it's going to be there in Dallas. I think it's going to home and home from now on, when they do play. And then Tennessee coming in, obviously, October 5th. A winnable game at Mississippi State on the 26th. Then you got Louisiana Tech. I mean, honestly, I think it's probably a 5-win team. Honestly, I think 5-7 is what I'm feeling. I just don't know if they're good enough roster wise, and they're going to improve enough on the offensive line to beat some of these teams in the upper echelon of the SEC, like LSU, like Ole Miss, like Texas. I think it's going to be a struggle for them. I think there are going to be some competitive games. I don't think Arkansas is necessarily going to get blown out a lot, but I just don't know if they have enough roster wise to get over the hump, even at home, beating some of the, tier 1 teams in the SEC. I just don't know if they have enough. I think they win the games they're supposed to early on. And I think, at Mississippi State, that's a game they can win. I do think they can get somebody, maybe A&M, neutral site. Maybe they get Oklahoma State, but I'm thinking that over under a 5.5. I'm kind of leaning probably more towards 5-7, but I do think they're going to be competitive in a lot of their games, though.
Yeah, I think their ceiling, absolute ceiling, is 6-6. I think they're probably 5-7, 4-8 ball club. Because I mean, really, if they lose to Oklahoma State, that has me having them winning against Arkansas Pine Bluff, UAB, Mississippi State, and Louisiana Tech. That has me winning 4 games. If they can beat Oklahoma State, or if they lose to Oklahoma State, can beat Auburn or can beat Tennessee or Texas or Missouri or something like that, that has me at 4 wins. So I think they're 4-8, but I think, or that's my initial just looking at the schedule. I think they're going to win one more of those. So I think you're right on the money. I have it same as you, 5-7, but I think their floor 3-9, ceiling 6-6. But here's my question, and here's what kind of makes me think it could potentially be 4-8, 3-9, is because you look October 19th. If you're going off what we think, he'll be 2-5 after October 19th. That's after LSU, and that's right before a road trip to Mississippi State.
Yeah.
If they say, all right, Sam Pittman, we've had enough of you, they can him, hit the streets, and they promote somebody to interim coach, that can do one of two things to a team. Now, a few years ago when it happened to Auburn and Cadillac became the coach, it rallied the team because there was multiple reports. It was not a great locker room. Coaching and players wasn't getting along. It was not good. Coaches weren't getting along with each other. It was just not a great environment. So you can understand that a new coach, a new regime taking over mid-year, former player, just have fun, can change it. But I've never heard anything bad being said about Sam Pittman. So I have to feel like if he's canned after October 19th and they're 2-5, he's done for the year. How does that shape out for the rest of the season? You go to a Mississippi State club and you might lose that game if your coach gets canned. You fall to 3-9, or okay, you wait till after Mississippi State, he wins and he's 3-5. Are you still satisfied? No, you're gonna kick him out the door, like they did to Jimbo Fisher when he won however many points after he got fired, or whichever coach that was. I could be wrong on the coach's name, but still, there's with him being on the hot seat so heavy, I think he's going to be fired before the season's over with, because I just don't think that their schedule matches up for them to be there and be successful and be in the talks even by mid-season. So I don't think that Sam Pittman is going to be coaching by the Texas game. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I think he gets canned after LSU, and if that happens, I mean, that can shake out the rest of the season. You lose the rest of your games, maybe even a La Tech, and you're looking at a potential 2-win, maybe 3-win season. So, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, it happened not too long ago. So, I mean, I'm excited to see what happens, but their defense is very thin on depth at the defensive backfield position, all positions in the defensive backfield. So that's going to be, if they can stay healthy, I think they have a chance to, turn some heads and be a little bit better on defense this year. It's just the depth they have is just not great.
Yeah, and I just don't think they really have the top end talent to beat, some of those teams I mentioned, even on their home field. And I do think they're going to be competitive in a lot of these games. I think it's going to be similar to what you've seen, like, maybe a little better than a year ago, but I just don't know if they're really going to be able to get it done against, like I said, tier one, like SEC title contenders, playoff contenders. I just don't think they have the type of athlete that can win those games very often. I mean, they're definitely capable of surprising one and maybe having a one score game or two go their way, but I just don't think. I mean, to be honest with you, like you said, I mean, I could easily see 3 or 4 wins. Like I said, I think they're going to be competitive. I think they're going to win one. Maybe they shouldn't, that because they're not going to be favored in many games. I mean, they're going to be favored against Pine Bluff. They're going to be favored against UAB, and they're going to be favored against probably Louisiana Tech, I would think. I mean, I can't see them being favored against, and maybe Mississippi State possibly, even though I think that's going to be fairly close. So, I mean, I just don't see them. I only see them favored in maybe 4 games, So, I mean, they're not better than A&M. They're not better than Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas, Missouri. Like, they're not going to be favored in any of those games. So, yeah, I think I've got them winning one they probably shouldn't, but I think 5-7 is probably most likely, I guess, or maybe like you said, 6-6 probably the ceiling. I could see them stealing one or two, but I think 5-7 is probably going to be about it, unless they can really improve that offensive line and shock some people in Fayetteville. But really like Sam Pittman though. I'm interested to see how this season goes for them. I'm really hoping he does enough to keep his job. He's a really good guy. He had a successful first. His year 2 at Arkansas was great. Year 3 was solid. And just took an unfortunate step back last year. But hopefully they can rectify it. And like I said, this is probably, you'd say, the 14th or 15th best team in the SEC, and this is still a fairly solid football team at the end of the day that I do think is going to be competitive more weeks than not.
Yeah, absolutely.
But kind of shifting gears to Oklahoma a little bit, the newcomer, one of the newcomers in the SEC. I think to me, this is one of the more fascinating teams in all of college football, to be honest with you. This is a team that's recruited in the top 10 consistently. I think this is a team that you may look at their record in the end of the year and they're a better team than what their record says they are. I mean, I think this is going to be a super competitive football team. I look at their roster, a lot of exciting pieces, kind of starting with the offense. Really exciting receiving core. Brought in Dion Burke from Purdue, guy that can take the top off. Got Jaleel Farouk, who's a really exciting receiver. Has been really productive for them. Got Nick Anderson, got Andrell Anthony, Jaden Gibson. So this is a really, really talented wide receiver room. A good situation for Jackson Arnold, who's going to be the full-time starter this year, first year starting. Got a little taste in the bowl game and had his ups and downs. Certainly had several turnovers in that game, but flashed some really good potential. What we've come to know from him. So obviously, Dylan Gabriel transferred out, went to Oregon, so they have a lot of confidence in Jackson Arnold to come in and play at a high level. He has Gavin Sawchuk at the running back spot, who I think can be a breakout player in the SEC this year. He had, I believe, at 1.5 straight 100-yard games a year ago. So this is a guy that's ready to take the next step and really be a lead running back for the Sooner offense. But the main question is they're really good at receiver, quarterback. Even though that's young, the upside is there. Feel good at running back. But the whole key to this offense and this team as a whole is this offensive line. Brought in a couple new pieces. Wasn't good enough a year ago. Definitely needs to take a step forward. But they added Branson Hickman through the transfer portal, kind of the crown jewel of this, offensive line, especially through the portal from SMU, plug and play starter at center. Got Favechi Nawu at right guard. You got Michael Tarquin at left tackle. So they got a couple guys coming in from the portal that's going to need to play right away to improve this offensive line. But Branson Hickman's kind of the key there at center. That's a guy they feel confident in right away. But, kind of locking down some of those other four spots is going to be critical. Um, if this offensive line can be, average to above average, I think this is going to be a really dangerous Oklahoma team. If it, falls apart and they don't hit on those guys, it's going to be a struggle with the schedule they have. But we know how good they are defensively as well. But just give me your thoughts on this Oklahoma offense and just the roster as a whole entering the first year in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, every single one of their linemen bolted and they left them last year. I'm ready to see what Jackson Arnold's capable of, but there's a lot of people saying that Texas is not going to do good this year. They're going to struggle because of their schedule and it's the SEC and they never dealt with it before. Oklahoma 10 times, their schedule's 10 times harder than Texas's is their first year in the SEC. And I honestly think that token goes for them as well. I think you're right on the money when you're saying you think that their schedule is going to not reflect as good as a team they are, that they're a better team than their schedule is going to show at the end of the year. I agree with that. I think that they are a fantastic team, but man, their schedule is an absolute gauntlet. And they got some question marks at some places. I just like you said, the offensive line. They potentially could have five offensive line starters that are transfers. I mean, they got Brandon Hickman, they got Michael Tarquin, they got Spencer Brown, and then Fabici Nuwawu. Like you alluded to, I'm not sure if I said his name correctly or not. And then Gary and Hatchett came from Washington, so they got a lot of options to choose from. But nobody played for them last year. Potentially, you have Jake Taylor, who could potentially start this year for him. He played in some backup roles last year in a fair amount of snaps. But there's a lot of question marks, especially on the offensive side of the ball. The defensive side of the ball, they got Danny Stutsman. He's a baller, senior leader linebacker, coach on the field. They went out and got some help in the portal, but the offensive the side of the ball is where all the question marks are, and that's honestly, man, if you can't put up points in today's college football, you're going to struggle. I'm high on Jackson Arnold. Everybody else is high on Jackson Arnold. I'm excited to see what he can do. He flashed some highs and lows in the bowl game. I mean, he had over 300 passing yards. I believe it was 2 touchdowns, but he also had 3 interceptions and a fumble. Yeah. And on his 4 turnovers, Arizona scored 20 points on his 4 turnovers, and they lost by 14 points. So ups and downs, highs and lows. Obviously, you can't predict a kid's whole entire season off of one bowl game. He's had a whole entire offseason. He's been with the guys. He's gotten bigger, faster, stronger. He's understanding things a lot better. He's smarter at the quarterback position. So I'm excited to see how he plays. Definitely playing in that bowl game is going to help. I think they're going to be an 8-4 team, to be honest with you. And again, I don't think that that's going to reflect how good a team they actually are. But man, their schedule, man, they open up their first SEC game, Tennessee. They host Tennessee. Then right after that, they travel to Auburn. So their first road game in the SEC is Auburn. That's brutal. The first team you play is Tennessee, and the first road game you play is Auburn. That's absolutely brutal. Then you have Texas and the State Fair. So that 3-week stretch is Tennessee, Auburn, and Texas. Then you got South Carolina. You got to travel to Ole Miss. And you get a little break, and you get to play Maine. Then you got to travel to Missouri. You host Alabama, and you travel to LSU. All right. So the last 5 games of their season, at Ole Miss against Maine, at Missouri against Alabama, at LSU. So that's an 11-2 team last year, Ole Miss, an 11-2 team last year, Missouri, a 12-2 team last year, Alabama, and a 10-3 team last year, LSU. And they travel to LSU, Missouri, and Ole Miss. Bama's the only one that travels to them. And outside of that, of all their double-digit win teams in the conference, it's Texas, Ole Miss, Missouri, Alabama, LSU. Only one of those guys comes to Oklahoma. Oklahoma has to travel to the rest of them. That's an absolutely tough schedule. Obviously, not having to travel to Texas. It's a road game. It's a state fair. Neutral site. Excuse me, not a road game. It's a neutral site. But still, they aren't playing in your stadium. It's an absolutely tough draw. This is one of the toughest schedules, probably third or fourth toughest schedule in the SEC if I had to imagine. Definitely right there behind Florida. So I think that their floor is 6-6. I think their ceiling is 9-3, absolute ceiling. But I'm looking at an 8-4, 7-5 if I'm being absolutely honest with myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're dead on. Honestly, I did want to talk a little bit about them defensively. Obviously, we know what kind of defenses Brent Venables had in his career. He's gonna have another really good one this year. You mentioned Danny Stutsman, kind of highlighter of that. Billy Bowman in the secondaries played a lot of great football for them. This is a defense that returns. I think their top eight. I think 8 of their top 11 tacklers from a year ago are returning. They added Dominic Williams, a big defensive tackle from TCU out of the portal. They added Caden Woolard, a defensive end out of the portal, to go along with their back seven, like their linebacker core, their secondary is really, really good. I mean, they're and add Dominic Williams up front. Those guys, I think, is going to help that front line even more. So this should be one of the better defenses in the entire country. We're one of the best defensive minds, in the building and Brent Venables. So we saw the jump they made from year one to year two, not only as a defense but as a team. If they can take another step forward this year, that'd be huge, especially with the schedule as you highlighted. And there's really two big keys for me to Oklahoma's season. I think they're a legitimate playoff contender if they get average to above average offensive line play, and Jackson Arnold takes care of the football. If those two things happen, I think they can be a legit. I think they can very well find themselves in the playoffs if those two things happen, because they really feel good about everywhere else defensively, the wide receiver core, some of your skill positions. Obviously, barring injury or anything, but if those two things happen, Oklahoma is going to be in a really, really good position in year one, even with a tough schedule. But I think, like you said, I think 7-5, 8-4 is probably going to be about right with this schedule and some of the tough road games that they have. But in my opinion, I really feel like they're going to be better than that 7-5 or 8-4 record would indicate. I mean, honestly, I think this is a top 15 team. I'll still say that even if they're 7-5, I'll say this is, in my opinion, still a top 15 to top 20, probably at worst team. The real critical stretch, though, I mean, early on, I mean, you got a chance to really dictate which way your season's going to go. Your first 4 games are in Norman, obviously highlighted by Tennessee coming in week 4. Appointment television, please put that game at night.
Yeah.
ABC, SEC, they've got the TV rights now. Please do us a favor, put that game at night. I love this. I mean, I cannot wait for this ball game. I think one of the more intriguing ones in the SEC this year, and we've got a whole list of them. So it's on that list, no doubt about it. I think we're setting up. Honestly, I think we're setting up for a huge Week 5 matchup in Jordan-Hare. Man, I'm telling you, Auburn's going to be 4-0, and Oklahoma's coming in 4-0. I feel it, man.
You think they're going to beat Tennessee?
I think they beat Tennessee at home. I really do, because I think, to me, in my opinion on that, is that's just such a, even though it's the SEC opener, that is such a, those 2 games in particular are such a turning point in the season, determining, are we going to be a potential playoff contender or not? Because they think they are, and they have the roster to absolutely be a playoff contender, playoff team this year. But, man, as you highlighted, though, man, you look after that game against Texas, I mean, at Ole Miss, at Missouri, Alabama, at LSU. I mean, that is just a brutal back half of the schedule. So those are 2 games that are winnable for them, that they really, need to go their way if they want to potentially be a 9-3, 10-2 type of team. But yeah, I really think that's a huge game. Obviously against Tennessee, I lean Oklahoma as of tonight. It's at home. I think that's going to be a rowdy atmosphere, especially for the first ever SEC game for them.
I like
I
it. You're
can,
calling a shot.
yeah, I can't imagine that's not going to be an absolute jungle in Norman that night if it is indeed a night game. And then I think you're setting up a huge matchup in Jordan Hare week 5 because I like the favorable schedule. I mean, if you're Oklahoma, you don't leave Norman before that game at Jordan Hare, and Auburn plays at home every game before that Oklahoma game. So I don't see any reason they're not both going to be. Now, Oklahoma may very lose to Tennessee, but at worst, coming in 3-1, I think Auburn's got a really good chance to be undefeated. So that's a critical turning point game, early in the season. Uh, Norman's going to be a jungle week 4. Auburn's going to be a jungle week 5, as they usually are. So, yeah, man. I mean, that's a huge critical turning point in the season for Oklahoma because that's a brutal back half of the schedule with some tough road games. But I ultimately think 7-5, 8-4 is where the Sooners are going to land because it's going to be tough going to Oxford, to Columbia, to LSU, and then obviously Alabama coming in. That's going to be some wars, and not even count Texas. So I'm just so excited for this season. See what the Sooners can do. But I think all in all, it's going to be a very successful year 1 in the SEC, even if the win-loss record may indicate it's not quite as much. I still think this is a really, really competitive Oklahoma team.
And I think it's crazy that they got this bad, this shafted this badly, because you look at Texas' schedule and you look at Oklahoma's schedule, you can tell who was favored in that deal. And then you wonder why, because in our lifetime for sure, definitely in mine and your lifetime, and probably all time, but in mine and your lifetime, Oklahoma has dominated Texas. They're better. They have more Big 12 championships. They have more national championships. They have more Heisman Trophy winners. And I'm pretty sure they're head-to-head in our lifetime. Oklahoma has a winning record over Texas. Yet Texas acts like they're the big bad dog, but honestly, Oklahoma's track record and their resume is better than theirs. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point. I was actually fixing to bring that up while we were on Texas. I think it's such a motivating factor for Oklahoma this year because 90% of the media talk all offseason has been Texas. What's Texas going to do in year 1 in the SEC? It's like Oklahoma it's not from a media perspective, it doesn't feel like they're coming in as equals. It's
Right.
like 90% Texas coverage, and then, oh, yeah, Oklahoma's coming too. It's like, but as you highlighted, this is a series, just if you look at head to head and even in the accolades of, Heisman's, and in the last, 20 to 25 years, Oklahoma's dominated this series, particularly in the last, 10 or 12 years or 15 years. So, I mean, yeah, I think for Oklahoma, I think that's such a motivating factor because it's like, all offseason, all they hear about is Texas and Texas coming to the SEC. And Oklahoma's over here saying, oh, yeah, didn't we beat Texas last year in Dallas? I mean, at the state fair. So, I mean, they're like,
Don't we have
okay.
more national championships? Don't we have more national championship game appearances? I mean, they're in the early 2000s. Oklahoma either won it or was in it just about every year, it seemed like.
Yeah, I'm looking at their series since yeah, so obviously last year Texas won. I mean Oklahoma won, excuse me. Texas won in 2022. Then Oklahoma. Yeah, I mean Texas has only won a handful of times since 2010. Since 2010, Texas has won 1, 2, 3, like 4 times.
So they're 10-4.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this is a series that Oklahoma's dominated here recently. I mean, I understand obviously why Texas is getting, I mean, obviously, to begin with, it's the University of Texas. They're always going to get attention, and rightfully so. It's a really good program. They're coming off a playoff appearance last year. You know, they're one of the top contenders for the national title and for the SEC title this year. So I mean, obviously, it's a warranted attention, no doubt. But I definitely think Oklahoma's being slept on and being overshadowed, kind of by Texas presence. And I think too, a lot of the media coverage for Texas is, I think it would be toned down quite a bit if they wouldn't have went into Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama last year. I mean, that victory there kind of put them back on the map, especially in Steve Sarkisian's tenure. Texas is kind of finally back on the map. And that kind of solidified them like, yeah, that Texas is actually back for real this time. We've heard that over the past 15 years at different points. You had Sam Ehlinger when they won the Sugar Bowl. We're back, and all that. Yeah. But I think with going into Tuscaloosa and beating Alabama last year, that kind of solidified like, okay, yeah, we really are back this time. And I think they proved that the rest of the year by winning the Big 12, making the playoffs. So that victory really propelled them forward. And I think, obviously, and that playoff appearance and that victory is a big reason for the hype this year and with the roster that they have returning. So the hype is very much warranted for Texas. But I definitely want Oklahoma to get their flowers too because they deserve it. They've been great head to head. I mean, this is traditionally, especially over the last 20 years, one of the top programs in the country. So respect to Oklahoma.
Playoff appearances.
That's what we're saying.
Yeah. Playoff appearances, New Year's Six Bowls. Yeah, we're not downplaying Texas by any means. We're just saying that Oklahoma needs the exact same coverage and the same type of hype around them because they are the same, if not a little bit better. Especially, like you said, in recent memory, and in at least since 2000, since 1990, since 2000, around that era till now, till present day, yeah, for sure, Oklahoma's top dog between them two. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I do think that Texas is going to have a better year than Oklahoma this year. Now, we are saying that Oklahoma, yes, has been better. And they deserve it, and they have been better in the past. But right now, Texas is better. I mean, it just is what it is. I feel like if this would have been happening when Oklahoma had Baker at Oklahoma, and they were doing on that run in 2018, 2016 to 2018, that little run they had there, if they were coming in then, I feel like the coverage would be all on Oklahoma because of what they were, and Texas really wasn't that great then. But, yeah, with just everybody knowing that they're coming in the SEC and then them having that playoff run last year, yeah, definitely helped the media just focus on them for sure. But we do want to tip our caps and give the nod to the Sooners because they definitely deserve it. Even though I don't think they're going to have that flashy of a season this year. I mean, maybe they can win a game or two. I think they can win a game that they're not supposed to, but I don't know that they can consistently win these games on the road against these top caliber teams. I mean, these aren't 8-9 win teams they're playing against on the road. I mean, these teams won double digit games last year, and every one of them was 11 or more, except for LSU, who won 10 and took Bama down to the wire. So I hate it for Oklahoma, but I think they're going to be just a middle of the pack team this year. Even though their roster is not a middle of the pack roster, I think their season is going to end up being where they're a middle of the pack SEC team.
Yeah, I think, like I said, the two things that got to happen if they really want the chance to, I guess, overachieve, you could say, they got to have above average offensive line play, certainly. And then obviously Jackson Arnold, limiting turnovers, having limited growing pains. If they can do those two things, I think they have the chance to kind of overachieve where they're projected and potentially, be right there on the cusp of making the playoffs. But, that's going to be two critical areas for them. But like I said, this is very, very easily going to be the best 7-5, 8-4 team in the country this year. Certainly. I mean, like I said, I think rankings wise, they'll be they're a top 15, top 20 team for sure.
What does Vegas have their win total at?
I I think it's 7.5, I believe. I
Uh,
think so. We're kind of right in line. I think along the same thinking there. Kind of before we wrapped up though, I did want to. Obviously, we'll have a full week 1 breakdown. Next week, be able to talk about week 0 a little bit, specifically Florida State, Georgia Tech are playing in Dublin, Ireland this Saturday. Really, the only big game of the day. But just want
next
to get your
Thursday.
overall thoughts of what are a few things that you're most looking forward to this season. Like just a couple bullet points, I guess, of with all the changes in college football. What are a couple things you're highlighting that you're most excited to see this fall?
Okay. I was talking about this with my dad the other day. I'm most excited to see how we learn which games and which losses matter and why they matter and when they matter. So, like, in the old schedule, if like it happened to Bama a couple times, like they lost an early game, like last year, they lost week 2 to Texas, and then it ended up favoring them to lose early instead of having that loss late in the year. If they lost later in the
Mm-hmm.
year, it probably would have hurt them in the rankings. So things like that. Okay, well now we don't really know what losses are good and when they're okay to happen. Like, we don't know that yet. So there's going to be some chaos happen where somebody loses in the beginning of the year, and they're going to think it's okay. It's okay. We have the rest of the year, and we're going to get. But then that loss and when it happened and how that team ends up being on the other side, and it's going to play a factor. It's going to screw somebody up, and somebody's going to bitch about it. I'm telling you, something weird's going to happen. I'm just ready to see. Not that all games aren't important, but you know how we learn though. Oh, this that happens. Okay, well that's probably going to put that team out of the playoffs, or oh that might put that team in the playoff hunt, and they might get a sleeper bid at the end of the year. It's just something along those lines. I'm ready
Mm-hmm.
for that. Obviously, I now that everybody that's in college football is pretty much the NIL like recruitment. Like it's all everybody was recruited out of high school now to the NIL. Pretty much they're all on the roster playing. I'm I'm curious to see how it plays out now because yes, the players have the power in the sense of I can transfer if the coach does something I don't want. But like when it comes to a bowl game or something and they say they want to sit out, but the coach says, no, we're paying you all this money. You can't sit out. The player says, well, if you don't let me sit out, I'm going to transfer. Just things like that, how that's going to happen. And just as a Auburn fan, I'm ready to see how Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson and Malcolm Simmons and those guys, Bryce Kane and all of them do. And, Lambert Smith and uh, Sam Jackson and all those guys.
Yeah, I think something specific, a couple things that I'm looking forward to. Obviously, I want to see how much the strength of schedule plays into the playoff picture, the playoff rankings, and,
Mhm.
you know, how exactly the committee's going to value that. Um, I'm definitely one of those that's hoping that they value that highly. Like I've always been somebody that's, like I want, the playoff body or governing body, however you want to look at it, like I want them to reward teams that have played a really tough schedule. And so obviously that's something that's going to favor the SEC as a whole, and give them the best chance of getting, the most bids possible into the playoffs. So I do want to see, how highly they view strength of schedule. And then two, like where the cutoff point ends up being for the playoffs. Like, is it 10-2? Is there possibly like a really good 9-3 team sneaks in? Like where does that cutoff line end up being? For
Right.
example, last year, Ole Miss would have been the final team in the playoff. So really, you need to be in the top 11 because the group of five is going to get one spot. They're going to get that 12th spot. So you need to be in that top 11. So where does that cutoff kind of end up being at is going to be interesting to see. And then finally, obviously with conference realignment, we're rekindling some old rivalries. Texas and Texas A&M kind of being one of those. But I want to see like what new rivalries are formed with conference realignment. Do we get some do we get some rivalries that not necessarily we didn't expect, but maybe you wouldn't have expected, 3 or 4 years ago. I think of one that pops up to the top of my head, and this can vary year to year depending on the state of the programs are in. But I think of like Oregon, Ohio State. They've got a really good chance of playing multiple times this year. Like they meet in Eugene in October the 12th, one of the best Saturdays of the year on the schedule. And then there's a very good chance that they meet in the Big Ten championship game again. So, like, what are some of those new rivalries that get formed, with conference realignment? That to me is going to be interesting to see, how are the old rivalries that get rekindled, kind of how do those get picked back up? You would expect it to be very, hot and heavy, especially with Texas and Texas A&M and programs like that, but also some of those new ones that could potentially get formed not only this year, but going forward in the years ahead. Those are some things I'm most excited to see.
And you just said something that made me, it's along the lines of something you said a little bit earlier too, but you said like Ohio State and Oregon. All right,
Mm-hmm.
they potentially can meet 3 times. So could Alabama and LSU or Alabama and Georgia or whatever. So could a bunch of people. But okay, so last year, Oregon played Washington. They lost.
Yeah.
They played Washington again in the championship game. They lost. They had 2 losses last year,
Yeah.
both to the same team, one in a championship game. Okay? All right. So then just say last year, or just say that this year, last year scenario happens this year. All
Which is
right.
very possible.
Yes. And then you have a Georgia team who has lost by field goal to Alabama and lost by field goal to just say Tennessee. I don't know if they play each other this year. I'm not sure. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but just say Tennessee. Okay.
Yeah.
So Georgia's not going to be in the SEC championship game. But let's say Alabama and Tennessee are in the SEC championship game. Okay. If that happens, Georgia's 2 losses are to the 2 champions in the championship. Oregon's 2 losses are to the same team, but the champion. One of them's the champion. Which team of those is if that's one of the final teams that's got to be in? Would Oregon be in over Georgia? Would Georgia be in over Oregon because they didn't play in the championship game, or because Oregon played the championship game, they'd be in over them? Would one of them be left out? Would they both make it into the playoff, into the finals, because there's going to be automatic bids, and the big five, the group 5 gets a bid? So like it's all of that is that what you just said made me think of, because I'm like, there's going to be teams that have the same 2 losses, but one of the teams is only going to have one loss to the one team, but he's lost to them twice, and one of them was a championship game. How is that all going to? It's going to be crazy, dude.
Yeah. I think you're 100% right. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see, because obviously if you're not a conference champion, the highest seed you can be is number 5.
Yeah.
Well, if you're, a power 4 team, say you're an SEC or Big Ten team, you don't win your conference. So you've got to be in that 5 through 11 spots, because the group of 5s get what you would think would be that 12th spot. So, you got to be, in that 5 through 11. So really you want to be in the top 8 at least, because, you're either 1 through 4, you get a first round bye, or, you're 5 through 8, you get a home playoff game. So you definitely want to be through that, in that at least 1 through 8 somewhere. That way you can guarantee either a bye or, a home playoff game. So, yeah, it's going to be curious. And I think that plays into the strength of schedule thing, too. Like you said, if you're comparing 2 lost teams and 1 loss to the same team twice, and then 1 loss to 2 teams in their conference championship game, I think then it comes down to what's the rest of your body of work look like? What are some of your other, your best victories, and
Right.
what was the margin of victory in those games? I think all that kind of stuff will come into play too, and that's why I want to see how highly they value strength of schedule, in this 12-team format. So, man, it's gonna be it's gonna be wild to see unfold, certainly. But yeah, it's definitely one of the. I like I said, we say this every year, but I mean, I just get more and more excited each year that comes along. just get more excited for the season to start because there's been so many changes and and a lot of talk over the off season, NIL portal, conference realignment, revenue sharing. I mean, the list goes on and on. But here in just a few days, and specifically a week from this Saturday, it's all ball, and I just can't wait to see how it
Yeah.
unfolds throughout the year and get into it more.
And I'm more excited this year than I ever have been. I feel like you're right. We say that every year, but I mean it this year in a different way because we are all getting to experience the rebirth of college football. This is not college football as we've known it. And it's not even the sense of it's not college football as we know it from when it changed from BCS to 14. Like this is a completely different college football. We're getting to see the new life of it. That's why I'm so excited for it because we're getting to see a brand new version of what we love, and that's going to make it more exciting and more fun. I think excluding all the NIL stuff, everything going on in college football is making it better as long as they stay within the 12 teams. I think if they get outside of that, we know our opinions on that. We've covered that 100 times. But we have college football right around the corner. It's going to be one of the best seasons ever because we don't know what to expect because we've never seen it before. There are no expectations. This is laying the groundwork. This is setting the standard this season is. So I couldn't be more excited. And folks, we have college football this weekend. It is a few games, really one game, but we have college football this weekend. And then we don't even have to wait a full week until we get SEC football because Arkansas and Arkansas Pine Bluff are kicking off on Thursday, October 29th, or
Yeah,
Friday, whatever that is. I think it's Thursday. They're kicking off
it
Thursday.
is.
Then you get a Friday night game. I'm not sure who the Friday night game is. And then bam,
Oklahoma's
Saturday's
playing
here.
Friday night
That's
against
right,
Temple, I
Oklahoma.
think. Yep.
And then it's Saturday and it's legit college football's here. But the first college game day that I see when I hear it crank up at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm probably going to cry tears. Like there are going to be a couple tears stream from my eye with just pure joy.
Yeah, I can't wait, man. I mean, it's good to finally be back, and I think,
And to see Nick Saban on set and not the sidelines, I'm going to cry pure joy of that too.
and I will say this, too. I'm, always, I was like, I hope he coaches as long as he possibly can, and obviously he feels like he did that. But I'm sad not to see him on the sideline, obviously, but I am excited to see him in this new role. And I'm more excited than I thought I would be to see him on television now because I just think there's so much he can add to game day. And game day's been a good show, but to me, it's been needing a little, McAfee kind of added a different element last year, but I think even from an analyst standpoint, I just think there's so much he can add. I just think he's going to take it to the next level again. And because in my opinion, it gotten a little bit, I mean, still a good show, but gotten a little stale. I just think there's a lot he can add from that analyst side of things. Kind of him and Herb Street bouncing back, ball talk back and forth. So I really excited to see that. Based on what he did at the NFL draft coverage, I mean, honestly, I think he's going to be as good of an analyst as he was a coach, to be honest with you. I mean, the dude has got up this morning and forgot more football than I'll ever know. So I'm just excited to learn more about the game, and I think there's so much he can add to the show and just add to college football in general in this new role he's going to be in. So I'm really excited for that. I think he's going to do a lot for the show. It's going to be a lot of fun, and yeah, like I said, just excited to have ball back, and it's been a long summer. And one last thing I did want to say though, there's obviously a lot of talk on like the future of college football and how rapidly things are changing and where they're headed. But I think at the end of the day, when those Saturdays roll around, it's still the same game. At the end of the day, the passion is still the same, the intensity is still the same. The product is college football is as popular as it's ever been. Ratings are at new highs. So I think, regardless of all the off the field things that we've talked about all spring, all summer, The product is still at an extremely high level. I hope it continues to stay that way. But I think the passion, the pageantry, it's all still there, and it's going to be a lot of fun to witness this year. As you said, kind of us as a whole witnessing this new era of college football and how things are going to unfold. Yeah, just excited to be back next week for a full week one preview. Man, I cannot understate how excited we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to add the Nick Saban thing. I think he'll be a better commentator and analyst than he is coach because he doesn't have to rely on 85, 19 to 21-year-olds to do the job. He's going to prepare. He's going to know what's right, and he's going to execute. He doesn't have to rely on anybody else, and he's going to do it perfect every time. So I think he's going to be a better analyst than he was coach because they take all the outlying factors out. And it's just him, and he can rely on him every time. But for sure, we thank you guys for tuning into the video. We want you to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you agree with, what you don't agree with, what you're looking forward to most about this upcoming season. We want to hear it all. So I appreciate you guys tuning in.